Hi everyone, this is Elena of the Witches Box, and I'm here today with another episode of Witch Booktube. And today is a little different. We've been doing this already. I think we've done 2 other videos where I give you just like a grouping of books on a particular topic. So we're going to be talking about astrological books or books on astrology in various different ways. When I first decided that I wanted to do these types of videos, I thought, 5. Let's pick 5 of a thing. This is a much bigger stack than 5 for a couple of reasons, but also because honestly, all I want to do is sit around talking about books. And so it was an excuse to kind of make a little bit of a longer video and talk about books. The books that I'm going to be talking about here will definitely be listed down below. Let's just jump into it. You'll notice that I'm in a little bit of a different scene only because I'm at a different angle in my office. It's the same space, just a different angle, because I'm trying to play with new equipment. Mama's trying to work it out. I'm learning. So it's different. So here we are. Who knows? Maybe next time I'll be back in my usual little corner, which is usually back here, right there. All right, astrology. So the first book I'm going to show you isn't necessarily a book that I would recommend you have to have in terms of the information given, because there are a couple of other books in this particular pile that will cover this information. It's just that this first book is such a classic. Everyone I knew back in the day and still to this hour, I think, has a copy of this book. The book that I'm going to show you, I have to give you a little bit of a warning. This book has been through it. It is destroyed. I'm a little embarrassed because this book was on a shelf for a while that was kind of being hit by the sun. So the spine is just destroyed. It's tattered. It's like the pages have browned, but this is like a classic. I have no doubt that anyone who's over 20 at this point has seen this book, but maybe not. I'm aging myself. But it is Linda Goodman's Love Signs. Do you see how utterly destroyed this book is? And the spine is, not only is the spine completely faded, but the oh my God, look at it. It's just falling apart. It's been through it. And then this photo of Linda Goodman, which looks like it's something out of the 1960s or 50s, the whole thing, it's old school. Yellow, it's traveled through states and houses and boxes and it's all of it. But this is the book that me and all my girlfriends back in the day, when I say back in the day, I'm probably talking about late 90s. I mean, okay, look, I'm embarrassed. This book, this is ancient history at this point. How many houses has this book? How many moves? I don't even know. So, okay, let's talk about some dates. The first edition was published in 1992. I got it somewhere probably in the mid-90s. So, do you need this book? I mean, I feel like if it's still in print, it's the kind of book that is a classic. It's the book that, how many of us went to this book every time we dated somebody new and we wanted to see how compatible we were with them? It's that book. It's the, I met someone and they're an Aries and I need to figure it out. I honestly don't even know if Linda Goodman's still alive, okay? This is how old this book is. So for instance, I'm going to give you a sample. She'll take Leo and Taurus, tell you what the characteristics of each sign is, and then give you a rundown on the Leo-Taurus relationship in general. And then, because it's traditional, because it was written back in the day, it'll have a breakdown with a reading for if it's a Taurus man and a Leo woman, or a Taurus woman and a Leo man. So you'll get that reading. Again, it's old, it's outdated, but at the same time, it's so, so classic. There isn't even space here for same sex. So there's that. Know that it's outdated. I don't know that I'm actually fully recommending this book because it's a have to have, other than it's like a relic of history. So it's that. I will never get rid of this book, even though the poor book is just kind of embarrassingly destroyed. It might even be worth it to buy a new copy. What's interesting is that for all it's been through, the spine is still holding up. It's not that the spine is like losing pages. I've had books where pages just fall out. This is just an embarrassment, but it's a well-used, well-loved book that was with me during all of my dating years. And yes, even when I was dating my husband, who at the time wasn't my husband, but it was a new love. I had to show this to you because this is kind of a relic, and I still have it, and I still love it, and I still look at it with fond memories. All right, so that's the first kind of show and tell for my astrology books. I have a lot of books on astrology. I have a lot of books on working with the moon. I love reading about it. I am not by any stretch of the imagination an astrologer, but I have a wealth of beginner knowledge. And I don't know that I'm ever going to go beyond beginner. I would never certainly call myself intermediate, because I feel like it's such a complex, multi-layered area of study. There's so much going on in the universe, right? The next book is a book that is super beginner, super summary, that gives you a good broad blanket of what the game board looks like. And then the rest of the books are a little bit more in depth in various different ways, that I think that if you had these books, you would walk away with a pretty good, solid beginner understanding. Don't be by any stretch of the imagination fooled by the word beginner, because to be a beginner with a good foundation in astrology, the amount of information that is necessary to understand would probably make you an advanced person in another discipline. Do you know what I'm saying? Because there's so much. But once you have an idea of the birth chart, the wheel, the houses, and the planets and the signs, and how they kind of overlay over each other to tell a story, you have a pretty good working knowledge to kind of maneuver yourself around the learning, which I think is one of the beautiful things about this. I don't think that the learning is ever over. So the book I'm going to show you now is a book that I just recently grabbed. It's called The Complete Guide to Astrology by Louise Eddington. It's small. It's a super basic outline with information, but I think that it's a good way of giving you a super complex body of knowledge in a way that will give you some understanding of what you're dealing with, right? It's not super complicated. It's bite-sized pieces of all the information. It's a good overview. When I first kind of I ran headfirst into witchcraft a long time ago, and I was trying to learn everything. One of the books that I ran to, one of the series of books that I ran to that I loved for all things, is the Dummies Guide. Remember the Dummies Guide? There's the Dummies Guide, and then there's another version of that. It's a different name. But there was a Dummies Guide to Astrology. There was a Dummies Guide to Tarot. There was the Dummies Guide to all sorts of different things. I actually really loved those books because it gave you like a very broad outline summary of a topic with references, and then help in terms of direction on taking that information deeper with other things, other studies, and other books. I really love those books, even though for a long time people were like poo-pooing the books. They were fantastic for that. But this gives you that kind of a broad, sweeping outline. Let me tell you what is in the table of contents. This is for this book. Part 1 is the building blocks of astrology. So an astrological foundation, the 4 elements and the 3 modalities, the sun signs, the ascendant or rising signs, and the decans, the planets and other essential bodies, aspects, houses. Then part 2 is understanding your birth chart, which is such an important part of all of this. Structuring your birth chart, interpreting your birth chart, taking a closer look. Part 3 is sun signs at work and in love, which is something that we're always wanting to know about. Your calling according to the zodiac. Love according to the zodiac. And then part 4 is key takeaways and astrological appendices, glossary of terms, astrological tables, and further reading. So as you can see, this is a basic. And if you just aren't sure, if you read something like we sent out moon reports every couple of weeks, and you read that like Mars is aspecting something else, and you don't have no idea what the hell that means, or the sun is conjunct Jupiter. What does that mean? This will give you an understanding of what those definitions are, what that actually means, what it's talking about. And so it's a nice, easy to read, easy effort kind of like, give me the information. So there's this. And this is fairly new on the market. So there's that. Just as a side note, the book that I don't have in front of me, but I will actually link to it down below, is The Dummy's Guide to Astrology. That gives you way more information. We're going to take a minute and shift. This is a series of books that I talked about maybe 3 weeks ago. It's 4 books by Stephen Forrest. And so I already did a review. You can go check out that video. These are 4 hefty books. It is not a series of books that I would say, hey, you're brand new, you don't know anything about astrology, read these. Have a little bit of an understanding of like the elements, the planets, the signs, and how they all kind of correlate with each other, and then dive into these books. And the reason why I'm recommending these books, and I'll show you what they are right now. This is the Book of Water, the Book of Air, the Book of Earth. Again, I did a review on all of these a few weeks ago, so you can check that video out. And this is the Book of Fire. I love a couple of things about these books. It speaks very in depth about the elemental energetics behind specific planets and specific signs. And it does it in a way that I found, even though there is a ton of information in these books. Like it's going to take a while to get through them, and it's also going to leave you a little bit like you're whirling because there's just so much. What I love about these books is that he writes in a way that is incredibly easy to absorb. There is enough repetition in each of these books such that it helps you learn what he's talking about in terms of the relationships between the elements and different planets in different houses. So once you read something like The Dummy's Guide to Astrology or a book like this, that gives you an idea of what the houses are, what the signs are, what the planets do in each house, right? Then these books go deeper and talk about what the energetic signatures are of those relationships and those combinations. So I really love these books. I wouldn't say that these are beginner, but if you are a beginner and you want to dive in, this gives you such a beautiful, in-depth understanding. I mean, I really love these books. I did absolutely feel overwhelmed at times while reading them. Like, this is not like a quick and read, easy in and out. But his writing is accessible, and as learning tools, I love them. I learn and I got so much, particularly because I'm sure there must be books out there already on this, but he really dove into the elemental aspect, where I don't really see that happening a lot with the books that I have read on astrology. So it gives you a really beautiful, different angle on approaching the signs and the houses and the planets through the lens of the elements that they represent or that they're associated with. After I read these 4 books, I have now a stack of other Stephen Forrest books that I haven't read yet, but you'll probably very definitely be hearing about them in the future. So there's that. I'm going to get now into what I would say are more complicated, a little bit more in-depth books. I've had this next book for a very, very long time, probably just as long as the Linda Goodman book, because it too, I don't know if you can see, has like the damage of sun, like the plastic on it, and the pages have yellowed. This is an oldie. This was in 1987. So it's the Astrologers Handbook with complete instructions for interpreting any chart and step-by-step instructions for casting your own charts. There are probably books out there that are more modern that have the similar information, but I feel like just because something is more modern doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. There is still a wealth of information out there that's been published 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. I got this in the very beginning of my makings, probably almost at the same time as I got the Love Signs book. There's a website, I've talked about this before, called astro.com that is super ancient because it's been around for decades at this point, and I don't think that it's ever once been updated. But on that website, I have a long list of all the people whose charts I've done because it'll keep all that information. You can do your chart. There are different ways to look at your personal natal chart. There are a couple of settings there where if you click on an aspect, like a line between one planet and another across your entire birth chart, information will pop up on all of those different relationships, the house, and what the moon in that house, in that sign means. It's a really robust website with a lot of information and a lot of ways to learn. I found that website in the 90s along with the other book and this book, and this is the book that I used to interpret my chart and the chart of other friends, where it was like, okay, so you're Scorpio on the first house cusp, what does that mean? And it tells you. So this is a phenomenal reference guide for reading a chart. I will also link to astro.com below so that you can check it out. But it's old, obviously. It's from 1987. I mean, it was super helpful. And I'm looking through here and I see things that are highlighted like Venus in Cancer. This is probably someone that I dated because my Venus is not in Cancer. But all of these things that you can get from this book. And it's a little bit more complicated. If you are minded in that way, if you're gifted in being able to read this kind of reference book and remember a lot of detail, it's great to read all the way through. It's interesting at the very least. But it's also just serves really well as a reference guide. If you're looking through a chart, it'll give you all of that information to interpret here. So love it. I don't even know if it's still in print. I'm backing up really quick because I did not read you the table of contents. I'm going to do that because I think it's important to know what you're getting. There's a section on astrology for the beginner, basic chart calculation, sun sign potentials, rising sign overlay patterns, the houses and how they relate to man and his environment. Again, old books, all the pronouns are, outdated. Planets in the signs and in the houses, dispositors of the planets, exaltations of the planets. Then part 2 is interpreting the aspects. So general rules for interpreting and integrating aspects. interpreting aspects, general remarks concerning conjunctions, sextiles, squares, trines, and oppositions. The conjunctions, the sextiles, the squares, the trines, and the oppositions, and there's a glossary. So that's what you get here. I'm going to try to remember to read all of the table of contents to all the books. I did not do it for the Stephen Forrest books. Just know that there's a lot in those books. This is the next book. It's Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark by Bernadette Brady. This is a fairly new book. This is for those who are familiar now, are feeling comfortable with looking at your birth chart and what's going on there. You may have a book like this where you've read what the chart means, your birth chart. And then a book like this is great for, there's something called a progression. As things change in the sky, as we move through our lives, the way the sky is looking today, overlaid on what your natal chart looked like when you were born, speaks to where you are, predicting different themes and different energetic influences that are going to keep coming through your life as you go. When you go to an astrologer to see what your year ahead is, you're doing predictive astrology. So this book speaks to that, while teaching you how to look at your own chart, how to look at progressions, and then do interpretations based on that. There's a lot here, but again, it's a really good reference book, as well as a book that I would recommend that you read through just to get a fuller idea of predictive astrology, because it is a thing. It's an art. The whole thing is an art. Okay, so let me read to you the table of contents for this book. Chapter 1 is the alphabet. It talks about planets in predictive work, angles in predictive work, planetary cycles, dynamic aspects, houses in predictive astrology. Working with transits is chapter 2, principles of transits, a case study of transits, grading transits, retrograde motion of transits, orbs for transits, feedback on failure. Second, progressions is the next chapter. Unique features of progressions, non-chart related progressions, chart related progressions, orbs for progressions, interpreting progressed planets. Chapter 4 is time maps, setting up a time map, the art of storytelling, case studies of time maps, a quick guide for using time maps. Chapter 5 is eclipses and Saros cycles. Eclipses, the nodes, eclipse orbs, and new and full moons, frequency of eclipses and eclipse seasons, the Saros cycle, the nature of an individual series, working with Saros series, practical questions about eclipses, a case study on eclipses, born on an eclipse. Chapter 6 is older systems, so predictive systems, the failed eagle, returns, personal planet returns, outer planet returns, luminary and planetary arcs. And finally, chapter 7 is a conclusion, which is called Once the Lark Sings. There are a bunch of appendices and charts here. Like, it's a substantive book, but not a big one. It's deceptively small, I think, for what it packs in here. So there's this. It's a really good book. So there you go. Now, this book is a little bit of a shift. I love this book. I did a review on this book, I think, over a year and a half ago, if not longer. But you know that I love Carl Jung. You know that I love Jungian psychology. You know that we love a good archetype here at the Witches Box. And this is called The 12 Faces of the Goddess by Danielle Blackwood. I loved this book, and I'm super excited to know that she's actually writing, or maybe she's done writing the first draft of her next book. I can't wait to read it. Danielle Blackwood is an astrologer, obviously, and she wrote a book that is gorgeous on the archetypal characteristics of each sign through the face of the goddess, or using the metaphor or the archetypes of various different goddesses. It's a beautiful book. I feel almost completely and utterly incompetent to even talk about a sign, because when you really take in the vastness of what astrology encompasses, I don't know that you can house all of the information about astrology in any given library, house, institution, anything. There's just so much. And what really turns me on about it is that there's a beautiful, complex layering of correspondences and energetic signatures over that entire system. I don't think that there can be any end to the learning. And what I loved about this book is that it took each sign and layered over it an archetype that was a goddess, and learning the different aspects of astrology from different angles, like this, right? Where you've got Stephen Forrest's books where he's talking about the different elements and the elemental personalities of each sign. And now you've got Danielle Blackwood doing it through goddesses and archetypes. It just gives you such a gorgeous, fuller understanding of what energetic fields you're working with. I just love it. So let me read to you her table of contents and then we'll move on because I got 2 more books. I know this is a long video, but we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Okay. Part 1 is on astrology and magic, a sacred marriage between heaven and earth, and how to work with this book. So you've got that, the basics of astrology. She covers elements, modes, signs, planets, and houses. Then magic and the wheel of the year. So she covers what's going on in the stars and in the sky during the wheel of the year. Ritual basics. So she covers a note on path working in this book, clearing space, grounding and centering, music, drumming, movement, casting a circle, creating an altar, a note on recipes in this book. Then part 2 is the heroine's journey. We've been talking in storytelling and in psychology about the hero's journey for countless decades, hundreds maybe, a long time. She's taking it from the heroine's journey, and it's through the signs with guiding goddess archetypes. So she talks about Aries and the Aries woman. Guiding goddess archetype is Matcha for Aries. Taurus, and the guiding goddess archetype is Aphrodite. Gemini, and the guiding goddess archetype is Butterfly Maiden. Cancer, and the guiding goddess archetype is Demeter. Leo is Rhiannon. Virgo is Hestia. Libra is Lakshmi. So much, right? Okay. Libra is Lakshmi for sure. Okay, Scorpio is Inanna. Sagittarius is Artemis. Capricorn is Frau Hol. Aquarius is Bridget, and Pisces is Kuan Yin. And then within each of these sign chapters, she'll talk about the archetype of the goddess, then the path working, so the ritual work of that archetype, and then she gives you several rituals or a couple of rituals for each one. This is a beautiful book if you're interested in goddess work, if you're interested in archetypal work, and if you're interested in astrology and signs. I love this book. Somewhere here on our Booktube we have a video review that I did years ago because I read this book. In fact, I think I have the date in the front of the book. I read this book February of 2019. There you go. This is before we were making our cool little book plates. So there you go. All right, let's get back down now to the last 2. These both are super old as well. They're out of my library. So this book is another book that has traveled long and hard with me. It's got wax drippings on it. It's been destroyed because it was sitting somewhere. I don't know where. You'll see that you can't even read the spine, and the plastic is also coming up. I don't know where I had these books, where they were on a shelf in the sun. I think it was in Hawaii because there was no way to get anywhere in the house when we were living in Hawaii where there wasn't sun blaring through, which was glorious, but not good for books. This book was published in 1980. It's called Astrological Insights into Personality by Betty Lundstedt. This is the book. I don't know that it's necessarily a book that you have to have. I have it. I loved it because it gives you a lot of the same information that you're going to get in a lot of other astrological books. Like, what does it mean if your moon is Venus and Venus are trine? And it gives you a readout of that. So you have that in the other books that I've mentioned. But I love this book specifically because I think it's the only book that I have in my library where it talks about the family dynamic, the family system. It talks about your astrological chart and how it relates to your parents, your mom, your dad, your siblings, and how that plays in, and those relationships play in to in your astrological chart. And I really love that. At the time, I know I didn't get it in 1980 because I was a little too young in 1980, but when I did get the book, I was probably, very likely, if I look at the notes and read them, deep in my own personal therapy for the first time. And things like this were really very interesting to me in terms of really mapping out what are my relationships with my family of origin and how has that impacted me, and what are like the soul lessons that we've all collectively as a family unit come together to have. And so this book was definitely part of that. And I have yet to find another book that is very specifically dealing with or addressing that. So this is why I kind of chose it. If you are like me in some way and are interested in things like that, this could be a book that can give you some insight. But know that a lot of what you have here is also references in terms of, here, and again, Moon Jupiter aspects, and it'll go through all the Moon Jupiter aspects. You have that information in the other books as well that I have already showed you. However, this does have that very particular lens that I really appreciated. Okay, so this is the table of contents. There's an introduction, there's a covering of the basics. It talks about mommy, daddy, and the kid, symbolism, and the wheel. Then it takes you through all the things that we've talked about before, the cardinal houses, the fixed houses, the mutable houses, the ancient seven. It speaks to polarities and modes and elements, and then it takes you through all of the astrological signs and the elements of those signs. And then it goes through all the planets and aspects. So this is definitely something that you've seen before in the other books. You can get these aspect correspondence like directory books by other authors that are probably much more modern. It's just that this particular angle is unique in terms of the library that I have, and I really, really loved it at the time because it was something that I was really interested in. So there's that. Now we're down to the last book. So this book is called Astrology and Relationships by David Pond, Techniques for Harmonious Personal Connections. Also old, not as badly treated as my others, but certainly has seen better days. It's interesting because this book on the side says free natal chart offer, see inside for details. I mean, you know that offer is like long dead and gone because it's been so long, but let me look really quick. This is a newer book. It's from 2001. This book, for me, it's kind of a little bit more practical, I think, than the Linda Goodman Love Signs book, in that it talks about different relationships and different pairings of signs, but from the perspective of, I don't know if this is true, but let's say that Libras and Aquariuses tend to have challenges and don't get along really well. Let's just say that. And if that were true, like the Love Signs book by Linda Goodman would say, this is a challenging connection. This book takes those challenging connections and talks to you about and walks you through how to really make the most of the connection, how to really overcome the obstacles of those challenges with the signs, how to have successful relationships with different signs, despite the fact that maybe one or two signs together may have some extra tension around them. So I got it for that because it's something really great to have, right? When you have a Love Signs book, to hear that, oh yeah, Libra and Aries do really, really well together. But when you are with a sign that you have challenges with, learning techniques to overcome those types of characteristics or mitigate those characteristics that are tense for other people, not in a way to change yourself or compromise, but in order to create solutions around how do we relate better. I thought that this book was really fantastic, and so I still have it. I haven't read it in a very, very long time, but I remember just finding that it felt like the more responsible approach for me after just trying to connect with lovers and friends that were signs that I really, really liked. And that's not to say that still, after all these years, there are particular signs that I can peg from a million miles away because it's like, it's the same kind of irritant. Like if I'm in a group and there's just like a person who's giving me like a little twitch, I can probably narrow it down to like 1 to 3 different signs. So a book like this, maybe I need to revisit this book to see how I can get around those like tension points. But let me read to you the table of contents. This is our last book. I know that you've been hanging out with me for a hot minute because this is a longer video. I really should probably try to keep these down to like 5 books, but here we are. The table of contents. It's a pretty basic table of contents, but again, I really like the book. There are probably other books that do this better. Again, it's not something that I've been in the market for, but this is me kind of digging through my library, and there are, as I did, I think it was in February or maybe in March, I did that massive book haul. I have a ton of new astrology books to get through, so maybe there'll be a part 2 to this at some point in the future. But anyway, the table of contents reads pretty simple, but there's more in here than this. So it covers the sun, which is a center, the heart, the moon, which is emotional fulfillment, Mercury, which is mind and communication, Venus, which is magnetism, sexuality, and intimacy, Mars, which is power, passion, and anger, Jupiter, which is growth through goals, dreams, and giving, Saturn, which is challenges, pressures, and insecurities, and then introduction to the outer planets. Uranus is the urge for freedom and the expression of individuality. Neptune is imagination, illusions, and spirituality, and Pluto is death and rebirth and the dark self and the soul's purpose. I'll link to it below, but there's that. Boom. And that's it for today. A different one, a longer one. Thank you for hanging out with me. If there are other books that talk about these things or address these things and are a little bit more modern and up to date, I'd love to hear about them. I'd also love to hear from all of you who have the Linda Goodman book. I mean, it's just one of those relics of your spiritual path, right? Like, it's a poor baby. I want to hear a couple of things. I want to hear, are there others of you who have this book still in your library, probably in way better condition? Tell me about your relics down below. Tell me if you have Linda Goodman's Love Sign book. Really quickly, an announcement. The day that this video is going live is a Monday. Tomorrow, we're doing our live book coven gathering for the June books that we were reading for our book subscription. and we're going to have Cindy Brannon join us. For those of you who got the books, I know that we've been sold out on those books forever, and that subscription was sold out already because we're at the end of the month. I want to remind all of you, be there. It's going to be wonderful. She's always amazing. I think that we're going to be doing something fun together. So this is just a reminder to those who subscribed and those who bought those books. Our next month's books are also going to be amazing. So I'm really trying to encourage all of you because summer is here. And we are all like running outside and playing. And because, right, we've been under quarantine for like 1,000 years and people are busting out. And I'm already planning like a couple of getaways here and there for a weekend where I'm just going to take a bunch of books with me, literally do nothing. I'm barely going to get dressed. I may just brush my teeth and lay out in the sun and do nothing but reading. So if you want some really amazing reading for the summer, and it's magical reading and it's educational reading, but it's also cool reading, sign up for our Witch Book subscription because we've got a really great list of books coming in the next few months. The reading is magical, the reading is educational, the reading is the thing. So you get to read and learn about magic while like being out in the sun and having a good time. We're going to be doing a lot of reading this summer. So the link to that is down below. Other than that, share with me what you're reading. Share with me about the books that I talked about, and we will talk again next week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Have a good day.